You might not like what I'm about to say, but after watching all 4 episodes of Eyes of Wakanda, I'm disappointed because I wish it was longer. Like, I ate the whole plate and I was like, I want seconds. But it was just that bittersweet feeling of, man, it's really over. And if you're still waiting for Ryan Coogler to miss, I'm telling you right now, you're gonna end up looking like Matt Damon in Saving Private Ryan. But not only does this show give us some very interesting isolated episodes, it provides way more context into the lore of Wakanda. We got an Iron Fist in this show, another Black Panther. It retroactively doubles down on Killmonger being one of the best MCU villains ever, and so much more. I'm gonna do something a little different in this review. So the first half of this review will be spoiler free, and then the last section will be spoiler filled. And like I always do, I'll give you a clear and obvious spoiler warning so you can get the hell up out of here. But either way, me and you know what we gotta do. We gotta talk about it. And boom! You looking for this? Eyes of Wakanda is an animated anthology series that follows events throughout Wakanda's history that was produced by Marvel Studios and Ryan Coogler's production company, Proximity Media. And the first thing I want to talk about is the animation style because it's something very unique and distinct, at least to the other animated MCU shows. And the studio behind the animation for Eyes of Wakanda was Axis Studios or Axis Animation. They've unfortunately gone out of business, but they provided animation for some of the greatest video game cutscenes like Halo 5, Halo Reach, on top of other animated properties like Arcane, some Love, Death, and Robots episodes, etc. So you know they were up to the challenge. And I love the animation style. It feels very artistic because it's supposed to evoke hand-painted drawings. And it was actually inspired by real-life African-American artists like Ernie Barnes. And on top of the animation style, we also have a pretty solid score and very good voice performances, one of which being Winnie Harlow. And we even got Braun in this show. I'm playing. Someone commented into one of my trailer reactions, was like, damn, Braun is in this show? And I couldn't stop laughing. Matter of fact, they should try to get Braun in one of these Black Panther sequels for real. But like I said at the jump, the show is an anthology series which follows 4 separate stories that culminate at the end. And the first thing I thought about this show was that it felt like a slightly undercooked version of Predator Killer of Killers. And it's actually structured very similarly. So I'm kind of confused. Like, they could have made Eyes of Wakanda a movie the same way that Predator Killer of Killers was, but instead they made it a 4-part little show. Because I think the runtimes actually add up to be somewhat similar. So in that way, it's like a 4-act structure. But we follow various Wakandan war dogs who we were introduced to in the first Black Panther. They're essentially spies that are sent across the world to obviously spy for Wakanda, but also retrieve artifacts. And each episode visits a different time period. And, you know, the first episode is probably going to be where people are like, is this show actually good? Because I was like, outside of my dog out here aura farming looking like he was Namor outside of the water. It did provide a very interesting commentary on what happens to war dogs when they leave Wakanda and like how that experience in the outside world affects them when they come back to Wakanda. So it's very much just like, you know, soldiers going to war and coming back and trying to assimilate back into the normal life. I did really appreciate that commentary. But then you get into episode 2, which I think is my favorite isolated episode, in ancient Greece, and it follows a real, it's dope. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's just really cool the way it ties into not just Wakandan history, I'm talking about real world history. And the great thing about this animation style is that it makes the fight sequences and action muy magnifique. Like my brother in Christ, and this isn't a spoiler because Marvel Studios themselves revealed this in their trailer this week, we get an Iron Fist in this show. And their hand-to-hand combat and iron fisting was fire! But each episode ultimately culminates into episode 4, which actually has a very interesting connection to the wider MCU at large. It also raises some very interesting questions that we'll go into in the spoiler section. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave my non-spoiler section there. I ended up giving Eyes of Wakanda 3.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't think this was like top tier MCU. It's definitely one of the better animated projects that they've made, but it's really good and definitely worth your time. Each episode is like maybe 25 minutes long. But this is now your spoiler warning. If you don't want to be spoiled, we're gonna be talking spoilers in this next section, so make sure you drop a like, follow, but come back later because I do really want to hear your thoughts. So something I really enjoyed with this anthology approach to Eyes of Wakanda was each episode had its own isolated theme for each Wakandan war dog. You get to see the eyes of a war dog who has spent more time outside of Wakanda and sees Wakanda as this isolated country that doesn't help. So he decides to create his own, you know, dictatorship, which ain't the best. But he brings up a very interesting point to the war dog of it all. What is their purpose outside of saving their country? Which gets followed up on in the second episode where we follow a guy, I think his Wakandan name is Mbaki, but we follow him and we learn that he's a Wakandan war dog that has allied himself with Greece and Achilles. So we get the entire Trojan horse thing, which funny enough is it's a nice little play on who this man really is. He's a Trojan horse just trying to retrieve an artifact for Wakanda. But this one I thought was really cool because we get a nice brotherly dynamic between Achilles and Mbaki. And the way they sew that into actual history is insane because, you know, Achilles' heel, all that stuff. But at the end, he himself is questioning like what his purpose is. Like, what the hell does he have to do? Like he said, he comes back to Wakanda and he feels like a stranger. And then that's followed up into episode 3 where we see not just the Iron Fist, but we see how Wakanda's tactics for retrieving these artifacts is fucked up. I mean, we saw that in the past 2 episodes, especially with the Achilles one, but this one really hammers it home, especially when you have another country that is able to go toe-to-toe with Wakanda, like an Iron Fist. Now, obviously, we get really cool action sequences with the Iron Fist around Wakanda, trying to get the little artifact of the dragon back, but it's so funny because all he had to do was tell her that he just needed the metal tongue that was in the dragon, but because he had to be all secretive using Wakanda's tactics, he made this shit more complicated than it needed to be. So by the time we get to episode 4, which is the culminating episode, and you learn that apparently in 500 years, Wakanda, the entire world, is going to fall to what they call the Horde, unless one of these artifacts, which she was searching for in all the other episodes, that was a cool way to tie all the episodes in together, is the key to Wakanda and the world's survival. You know, one thing I will say is that this kind of completely ignores the time travel rules that were set in Endgame. Like, this is straight up Terminator. So that was like the biggest thing where I was like, they just ruined the Endgame, you know, time travel stuff, because technically this would need to be a separate timeline. But the way this show treats it is that no, this is part of the actual sacred timeline. It's not, it doesn't branch off the way Endgame described it. But I'm okay with being Ray Charles with it, because the way it culminates is fire. Because these guys retrieve the artifact of that little axe from the first Black Panther that Killmonger says was taken from us. And that artifact is the first domino that falls into Killmonger being the one who opens up Wakanda to the world, which further solidifies Killmonger as one of the greatest villains in the entire MCU, because he won in the end. I mean, obviously his approach to getting there and the steps he took to get to that throne probably aren't the best way, and he wanted to do a mass genocide. But like all these episodes have been trying to tell you is that Wakanda is better open to the world. And to quote T'Challa in the post-credit scene, mid-credit scene of first Black Panther, where he says more connects us than separates us, that's right here is just hammering that home and stamping it home. That is the clear and obvious message. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Eyes of Wakanda. You know, I wish it was a little better. Hopefully, I wish it was a little longer as well. I do hope that we get to explore more of this Wakandan lore, because really, you could do like the Predator route where we just visit different time periods, but I think this kind of works as its own isolated 4-act structure, because it provides enough context into the wider MCU at large and retroactively, you know, makes Killmonger important. So while I could see them exploring more, I don't think they will, because it just works by itself perfectly. You know, it also doesn't help that the animation studio who made this is out of business. But all in all, Eyes of Wakanda, good. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Eyes of Wakanda once you've seen it? If you've already seen it, drop a comment down below. And as always, like and follow for more. Gotta get double locked in after seeing that name.
Wakanda is a kingdom of many secrets.
Yo. This animation is a little different, but I'm messing with it. Okay. I mean, it didn't really show much. I mean, it did. It showed, but it did give you a sense for what the animation style is going to look like in motion, because all we've ever gotten so far for Eyes of Wakanda is just little teasers and images, still images. So I like how it's different. It feels like something unique, which I think is crucial. I think that's what makes all the other animated projects under Marvel special in their own ways. Like, you got X-Men 97 has a very distinct style, and What If has its own distinct style, which I'm not... That's the animation style I was hoping this wasn't going to be, because I'm going to be honest with you, the What If animation style is, it's good. It's not bad or anything. It's just like, I did not want that to be like the thing. You know what I mean, like every animated project looked like that. So I'm glad this is very distinct and unique. And on top of that, we got new still images along with this new footage. And here we got someone on the throne. Kind of reminds me of when Namor was on his throne, but it's clearly someone different. You know, I'm really loving the establishing landscape shots of Wakanda. I'm assuming this is all in Wakanda. And as a matter of fact, to give you more details, it's a 4-part animated anthology series created by Todd Harris and produced by Ryan Coogler. And it follows warriors throughout Wakandan history who are tasked with traveling the world to retrieve vibranium artifacts. So that there is already interesting, because we know throughout the MCU's history, vibranium is kind of leaked to other parts of the world, mainly due to Ulysses Claw, like Captain America's shield, obviously. So I'm excited to see what other parts of the world we visit throughout not just Wakanda's history, but the MCU's history. This also very much reminds me of the Predator Killer of Killers movie that just came out, which is very similar, seen as an anthology with 3 different storylines, but then they converge at the end. So I'm curious if something similar is going to be happening here. But either way, looks pretty decent. I'm gonna check it out. I got Disney Plus, ain't gonna hurt me. But let me know what you thought about that teaser trailer down in the comments below, and as always, like and follow for more.